Divorcees of Reddit, when did you know your marriage was over? It was after the third time of losing her temper and trashing the house, including throwing a guitar stand at my work laptop and breaking it. She went to her mom's for 2 weeks and I realized I was much happier without her around. After a week I told her I wanted a divorce. Moral of the story, don't be with someone who thinks violence is an appropriate answer to problems. When I would go down in the basement and pretend to do laundry to get time by myself away from her. When I realized that for months I had been trying to guess what mood she'd be in when I got home from work so I could enter the house appropriately and not make her any angrier than she'd already be. We were living with her parents so we could afford for her to be a stay-at-home mom. I was very unhappy living with her parents and told her I wanted to move out. She said the only way that was happening was if I doubled my income because she wasn't going to work. So I moved out without her. When our therapist told him to spend a day not talking to me unless he had something nice to say, and he replied, but what if I need to give her feedback? His mom kept saying stuff while no one was around but he wouldn't believe me. Then she would change her whole story when even one witness was around and I looked like a fool. This has been happening and then his grandmother died. His mom told my parents that they should not come for the funeral and she also told me that I should not come to the funeral either. We have a custom as per which a new bride of the family first goes to a happy family event. Since no such event had happened in his family even 2 years into our marriage, his mom was of the view that we shouldn't attend the funeral. She kept insisting on this point so we did not go. Then she started telling everyone we knew in common about what a daughter-in-law she had and how my parents were too for not even coming to something like grandmother's funeral. My ex-husband knew what had happened but not once did he call his mother out. Instead he said if I keep saying such things then it would be very difficult for us to live together, which in my dictionary means he basically threatened me with a divorce. No one says such things without meaning it. So I knew in my head I was going to get divorced. Just gave myself more than a year to be mentally prepared for it. Once I was mentally ready I straight up told him I wanted a divorce after a heated argument. He was in shock because most Indian women don't ever ask for divorce and keep dealing with the in-laws bullet all their lives. It's expected of us like breathing is expected of humans. That family can go all duck themselves. When I should have known, my spouse sent me an email that said he didn't love me anymore. When I actually knew, he announced his engagement to an 18-year-old a few days after the divorce papers we signed. I was a little slow there. When she began screaming at our 3-year-old son to shut up, I was willing to take her abuse. I couldn't stomach her doing it to our son. Around this time last year, my now ex-wife suddenly stopped wanting to be close to me. She realized that she gradually fell out of love with me and realized that we were too different for her to be happy. I recall very vividly when she told me she was going to visit her sister over a weekend and that I shouldn't bother texting her because she wouldn't be on her phone much, which I knew was a lie. She was always glued to her phone. She came back and I was really happy to see her again after a few days, but I could tell from her body language that she just wanted to get back into her car and leave the house again. I knew our marriage was in trouble, but that night was when I think I realized it was over. I tried so incredibly hard to make it work and fix the relationship, but she simply wanted out and had no desire to work through our issues. She stopped wanting me to touch her and I felt like I had to be absolutely silent and not make any noise in the house at all so that I didn't bother her. Eventually she moved out of the house and the divorce was finalized earlier this year. After many dark weeks in which I kept hoping to not wake up in the mornings, I think I'm slowly recovering. All of her stuff is out of my house now and I'm trying to turn it into just my space. Still not really sure what to do with myself and I have bad days where I don't want to be alive anymore. But they aren't as frequent as they were. I found out I was pregnant close to our 5-year wedding anniversary. When I asked what he wanted for our anniversary he said an abortion. When I miscarried 3 weeks later he threw a party for it. The irony of it all is that we got a divorce cause he knocked up another chick that refused to abort cause she was Catholic and needed to be married to him so the child would not be a bastard. He is miserable in another marriage and I have been happily divorced for 6 years now. When I realized how much abuse I took on a continuous basis, it wasn't physical much, but I would get things thrown at me. Cops came once because the neighbors once thought I was abusing her. She admitted to the cops that it was her throwing things and put a hole in the wall with the shoe she tossed. Don't worry. The cops asked me what I did to piss her off, told us to keep it down and left. A majority of the abuse was verbal. I could never earn enough money. When I worked over, I was never home and she felt lonely. When I was home I couldn't get everything done she wanted me to do to her level of satisfaction. What made me finally wake up? One of my co-workers said something causally, man. She treats you like it. That is what made me wake up and seek a lawyer. That divorce was the most costly and brutal thing I've ever gone through. Still paying on it, and will be for years to come. When I ended up in therapy with his mom instead of him. Not a divorcee either, but I managed to convince my mother to file for divorce after a full year of my father refusing to speak or even look at her. They were living in the same house, paying the same bills, using the same utilities. He got angry at her over something I don't even remember now, and just decided to pretend she didn't exist. When we were discussing trying for a baby and she hit me with for a while I thought I didn't want kids, but I've realized I just don't want kids with you. When she slammed our bedroom door on her own forehead, yelling at me that she was going to get me arrested with the proof that I beat her up. I was recording her doing it. She was so drunk she didn't notice. I let her run with it. When she told her brothers that I beat her up and sent them pics of the bruises on her face as proof, I sent them the video of her doing it. They never said a word to me. After a party at his parents', he hit me on the car ride home because I didn't have a good enough time. I yanked the emergency brake and got out of the car. I never went back. When my 5-year-old son pulled a hotel key card out of her purse, and she had no reason to have one in her purse, we had some issues, but I thought we were on track to working them out. She was acting nicer to me, and things did seem better. It felt like someone had punched me in the chest. Medical issue. Hemorrhaged all over bathroom floor. He was at work. I didn't bother calling because I knew he wouldn't bother coming home. When I did tell him later that day, I might as well have told him I'd had a minor headache for all the interest he showed. Yep, I'm much better now. The day I got a call from his mistress, while he was in the room with her, telling me she wasn't his first mistress. Come to find out there have been at least 3 long-term mistresses. When I caught him trying to throw a metal folding chair at our oldest child. I walked in on my husband in bed with another woman in my house. And I say my house because I made the entire down payment and paid the mortgage. I moved in with my parents for a bit while he stayed living in the house. I would have panic attacks every time I went in the house after. I continued to pay all the bills for him to live there. We were going to try and work things out. We had been together for so long that we didn't want to throw it all away over one mistake. But while I was paying all of the bills for him to keep living in the house while I was living at my parents', he booked a trip to Las Vegas. Las Vegas was my dream trip and he never made an effort to go with me. He told me he would cancel the trip to work on things and I believed he would. Which was stupid on my part because he always lied to me. About a week before he was supposed to go he stopped talking to me. He told me he was going the day he flew out and the same evening I went and signed a lease for an apartment. When he got home he begged me to work things out. Said the trip wasn't worth it and said everything he could to try and get me back. The house sold in February and we were divorced a year later. When I found myself wishing he was dead just so I wouldn't have to be married. Now that we're divorced, I can't believe I had those thoughts. He's a great man, a great dad, and my best friend. It wasn't his fault that marriage was suffocating me. If something happened to him now, I'd be devastated. But then, every time he came home I was disappointed that he'd survived another day. When my son, 1.5 years old, comforted me while I was crying after another abusive argument, I knew then I did not want him growing up thinking that was a normal relationship. When I was away on a business trip and I discovered she'd left our 2 infant children, 1 and 3, at home alone for 7 hours to go out clubbing with her girlfriends. This was just one in a long string of irresponsible things she'd done since becoming a mother, but it was definitely the moment when I knew it was over. When I was in the hospital after delivering our baby via C-section and he asked if he could bring me some food the next day when he came back, I said I wanted a burrito. He said he wasn't going to a Mexican place. He was going to Panera. The next day he walked in with a Panera bag, sat down, proceeded to eat his lunch in front of me, didn't get me anything because he said, "You never told me what you wanted." Shortly after, she tried to murder me. When I found out her plans to leave, so she abruptly left. It didn't go well for her at all, but that was a long time ago. Far as I know, she's still alive. I'd have heard if she died probably. She has no part in our kid's life whatsoever. That's actually for the best. I'd just come home from another 12 hours shift at work. The baby's diaper was dirty. The house was a mess. The sink was stacked with dishes. And my ex was goofing around on the computer like always. I remember thinking, as I grabbed the baby and changed his diaper, I can't wait until X leaves for his business trip. He's no ducking help. It's easier to do this alone and not have him and the baby messing things up. Lightbulb moment. It's easier to do this alone. Anyway, I was changing the baby, and X snuck up behind me and grabbed my ass. He always did that, even after I told him not to, while he was on his trip. I researched marriage counselors. We went to an intake session, voiced our frustrations with the housework, me, and lack of sex, him, and went home. On the drive home, he said, "If we divorce, we can still sleep together casually, right? And we're done here." Separated within a month, and he never got any from me again. Happy ending. Stayed single for a few years. It was fun. Reconnected with an old friend. Fell in love and married him. He is kind and respectful and we take good care of each other. When she got arrested for domestic violence. Not a divorcee, but my parents got divorced twice in order. Started hitting the kids. Started making mountains out of molehills. And the recent one was started having affairs. I came home from work one day and she was gone, along with all her belongings, and some of mine. 15 months later. Still not heard a word from her other than when my lawyer sends her forms and I get them back with signatures on them. When we planned who would get what if we divorced, we were so casual about it. But it told us we both knew we wouldn't last. It certainly made divorce very easy when it finally did happen. The actual divorce happened because he got another woman pregnant and she offered to pay for our divorce so she could marry him. When I came home with a crunch wrap from Taco Bell without telling her and she screamed her head off, pushed me against the wall and then punched my arm to the point where a bruise was made. When we stopped fighting. If you're still talking to each other, even in an argument, about your marriage, there's hope. Once you stop fighting, that means you've given up. Literally when she said I want a divorce. Totally out of the blue. Only married 2 years and was out of work for about a year. She was pregnant 4 months after the divorce, so quite obviously she was having an affair. When my oldest daughter asked me why daddy and I hated each other, I didn't think our problems affected her up until that point, and I knew I couldn't let her grow up in that kind of home. I know what the underlying reasons were, but I don't remember an event on her side. No matter what I did, I couldn't satisfy her never-ending materialistic appetite. Every time I reached a benchmark that she demanded, the goalposts got moved. On my side, my reaction to this relentless pressure was to drink a lot. I probably wasn't sober for several years. We spent 2 years living on opposite ends of the house before I finally moved out. 12 years later, we finally got legally divorced this summer, which was about as quick, easy, and amicable as could possibly be. Amazingly, we raised a beautiful, brilliant daughter who's got an amazing head on her shoulders and is kicking ass and taking names as an engineering student at Cornell with lots and lots and lots of grant money. I don't feel anything toward her. Not good. Not bad. I'm grateful that the divorce went so smoothly, and I suppose I wish her well and that she can one day find her happiness. But I have no desire to ever communicate or encounter her again. She moved a couple thousand miles away 2 years ago, so that part should be pretty easy. I got pregnant right when our marriage started going to it. We had been together for 6 years and then married for 7. I waited to even think about having children, and I should have gotten back on birth control a couple of months prior, but felt like I had things under control in that department. Well, surprise. Anyway, when he left me in the hospital after having just given birth and told me he'd be back in a little while because he had gotten his vehicle stuck and needed to go have it towed, Something along these lines. I knew that I was not going to see him again. He left me in the hospital with a brand new baby. Thank God his sister came down and she drove me and the baby home. I didn't see him again until the baby was like 9 days old. For the record, the baby is an 18-year-old college freshman and I could not imagine my life without him. So, for all that heartache, I got the best gift of my life. Edit, a couple words. I've never wanted kids and he knew and accepted it. When he told me, I figured you'd change your mind by now. I was out. Me and the ex just tied the knot and finished moving in together on earlier that day. Went to celebrate with friends that night. One of my buddies was going to crash with us that night, so we all took a taxi back. I was in the front so I can translate directions to our cab driver. We were in Japan. About a block away I turn around to tell them we are almost there and they are making out and he is feeling her up. Easy decision after that. When I saw the baby, he did not look like me. I looked after him and my wife for a month until we got a DNA test. But I knew when I saw the little guy. When I called her from my hospital bed, in another country, to tell her I'd broken my ankle, for her to say "Os agreed, who's going to walk the dogs now?" There had been a lot more controlling and bullying bullet before that. But that was the big one for me. Unfortunately it took me another 17 years to pluck up the courage to leave her. Asked him to not yell at the kids. He yelled at me for asking him to stop. It was the day after my sibling was killed. When we were in a counseling session, and the counselor asked me why I was so unhappy, I said it felt like I was the one to have to make the adjustments, compromises and sacrifices. Our entire marriage, while my ex refused to give up anything. She said that was a powerful statement but probably not accurate. Then turned to my ex and asked how he felt about what I said. He just shrugged and said, "She's right. I didn't feel the need to sacrifice anything." And she always gave in. No apologies. No offer to make changes. Just said it would be more of the same. I was done. New Year's Eve I was in my office at home marking papers. Neighbors banging pans celebrating. My wife in bed at 9 PM again. My friends once again invited us out but she refused as always. I knew then no matter how hard I tried she was never going to pay attention to me. After 5 years I was exhausted, lonely, bored and felt unloved. When he got argumentative because some friends were trying to explain to him the concept of quantum mechanics using Schrodinger's cat as an example, he got angry, called it a cult and said "Show me your dead or alive cat like a Christian would show me their God if it existed." I was like, "Dude, you dumb." Wow, mine is so tame. When she told me she wanted a divorce because she wanted to be with more guys than just one, that's when I knew. We were together 20 years and happy for 15 years. I stuck it out longer than I should have because I believe in marriage and not running away from trouble. Also, financially it was hard to leave. I think that's a big problem many couples face, especially the women. Anyway, my ex started drinking a lot and although never officially diagnosed, I'm pretty sure he was bipolar. He would get super angry over the smallest things. He became verbally abusive with name calling. Spouse should never name call. There are ways to get angry and argue and discuss without resorting to name calling. He absolutely refused to go to counseling for his anger or drinking and I decided it wasn't my problem anymore. I've learned you can't make someone fix their problems, especially if they won't even acknowledge those problems. I got divorced and now I'm with someone who is very loving and kind. When she told me she wanted a divorce, of course she immediately backtracked when I walked out the door. And being a good human I came back in and let her apologize. But I knew it was over. Never break the chain is real. Would work later and later. Then come home and drive past my house because I just wasn't ready for the pain. I would circle the block. Or just drive around the neighborhood. 25 years later, I am doing it again. My home is my gauntlet. My crucible. My car is my sanctuary. Here in my car. When I put on lingerie and he said, "Do we have to?" Just because it's our wedding night. And then 4 months later, we still hadn't had sex since our wedding. Despite having done so prior to that, on our honeymoon when I walked in on him jacking off and me trying to participate resulted in him responding with "I don't want sex. I was just bored." And him zipping up his pants. We were together 5.5 years. Married 2.5 and then our divorce took another 2 years after separation. Custody battles are a rich. I was bottle feeding a kitten, but we were planning our first vacation. The kitten was old enough to wean, but I liked the little snot, so we booked a pet-friendly hotel and took her with us. My husband was laying on the hotel bed petting her and she was getting a little rambunctious, so he went to drop her off the side of the bed to the floor. She held onto his wrist with her claws, scratching him. He flung her across the room into the side of the trash can, pissed and swearing, and I thought, if this is how he treats a kitten, what is he going to do the first time one of our kids destroys something of his? I can't have kids with this person, but I was on vacation, 12 hours from home and trapped in the hotel room with him. I had never felt so alone. It wasn't the first straw or the last, but it was the moment I knew. 6 months later, after trying to get him to go to couples counseling, church, anything, I moved out. The cat is still a little weirdo, but I'd rather have her over him no matter what was offered. When I found a post by her talking about how she got tested for STDs because she didn't trust me and tested positive for one, so I got tested and came out squeaky clean lol, among a million other things. When he told me I would need to push him into having kids just like I pushed him into marriage, he proposed 3.5 years into dating. My only push was telling him that I wanted to marry him someday. That was the first reason to leave, but there were others. When I found myself thinking about other people while having sex, when I found myself leaving the apartment during arguments versus staying and talking, I knew it would get us nowhere. When counseling made things worse, when I looked back and saw all my self-talk videos to myself where I confess how much I can't stand my husband, when finally I realized I had enough and that a better future was one without him. When he told about a neighbor whose husband died unexpectedly, instead of feeling sorry for her, I felt such envy that I scared myself. Memorial Day weekend 2017, we went to visit his parents up north. We were having a great time and playing a silly drinking game. Literally nothing but laughter and cheers all around. We all got pretty drunk, but I remember there were no bad vibes, just chilling and swapping stories during our game. I went to bed first and he came upstairs later and woke me up to tell me what a waste of space I was and how fucking terrible I was to be around because of my ADHD and the weight I had gained. He was not fit by any means either. He said he hated me and wished I was dead. I remember sobbing myself to sleep, but when I woke up the next morning I wasn't sure it was real because he acted like nothing happened. I let it go until we got home from the trip a few days later and took our suitcases upstairs. I was exhausted and said I'd unpack in the morning. And he said, "This is the it I'm talking about. You're so ducking lazy." I endured so many of his outbursts and supported him through so many dark moments in his life, and never got the same in return. I helped put him through college, but he couldn't stand to have dinner with my family once a month. And my family is chill AF. It's not like some nightmare hellscape of in-laws. I asked for a divorce in a crowded restaurant. When we got home, I was packing a bag and I had my video running the whole time in my pocket. He threw one of those little Target folding pappers and chairs at me and told me I was crazy and I'd never find anyone to love me. Well, I did, and it was me. I lost 60 pounds and another 200 lbs, and I learned how to manage my ADHD a little better. I feel good.